Tomatoes are definitely the jewel of my vegetable garden. They are the king of my vegetables in my kitchen garden, and I just love tomatoes. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is mainly for documenting my journey through gardening. I love to make videos about growing vegetables, about growing cut flowers, about harvesting, about starting things from seed. You'll find a lot of videos on this channel about gardening for the small home gardener. I am in Central Indiana. I'm in Zone 5. And today I'm going to share with you the varieties that I am going to grow for tomatoes this year. The way that I store my seeds, I have 4 of these huge photo books that I'll show you a picture of that on the screen. And I have about 16 inserts of this size. These are 4x6 photo inserts. And I keep a lot of them for tomatoes. I have 4, and I think that I have 2 more that I didn't bring down. But I just went through all of my tomato varieties, and I finally narrowed it down to about 18 varieties. I have some varieties that are going to be a repeat for me because I just love them, and I have a bunch that are definitely new, and then I'm hoping that they become my favorite. The biggest challenge that I find myself when it comes to growing tomatoes in my small urban garden is that I don't have enough space for all of the tomatoes that I want to try. And when I say all of my tomatoes, oh my gosh, I have about 18 varieties here that I finally narrowed down to 18 or so. But I probably have another 18 varieties that I'm not going to try this year because I just don't have the space. And if you're thinking, my goodness, how many plants are you starting for tomatoes? And the last couple of years, I've had it between 35 and 42. Last year I had 42, 44 varieties, something like that. And this year I wanna take it down to about 32, 35. I don't know how that's gonna go. I do a lot of canning. I try to save as much tomatoes in different weights for the following months when I'm not harvesting tomatoes, and we do eat a lot of tomatoes. I just love tomatoes, and my family also love tomatoes. So grabbing a bunch of plants, the way that I prune them, the way that I plant them, it is just very easy for me to start 18 varieties, a couple of plants for each variety, and that's probably going to be a lot more than I need for this year. But there are a lot of varieties that I love to try from seed, especially growing from seed. I'm going to share with you what they are. The first variety, and I mean, they're all my favorites. If they're here, it's because they're all my favorites, or that I am trying them for the first time this year. The first variety is Dr. Witches or Dr. Witches, however you say it. This tomato is an absolutely delight to have in my garden. It is huge, it is meaty, it doesn't really have that tomato taste. It's more like a sweet, acidic tomato. I don't know really how to describe it. It is an amazing producer, and it doesn't really get sick. The couple of years that I have been growing Dr. Witches, it hasn't really succumbed to any sickness, and this year it is definitely a must in my garden. Pink Jazz is another favorite of mine. I love huge meaty tomatoes. I love to slice them, put a little bit of salt, and I love tomatoes. Tomatoes are, like I mentioned, the jewel of my garden, and Pink Jazz is an absolutely delight. Orange Jazz is another favorite of mine. It's very close to Pink Jazz, but it's an orange tomato, and I love them. You guys, these guys get huge. If you want to grow huge variety tomatoes, try Pink Jazz or Orange Jazz because they're amazing. I don't have the main packet for pineapple tomatoes, but pineapple are also one of my favorites in the garden. This will be my 3rd year growing pineapple tomatoes, and I just fell in love. And like I mentioned for another tomatoes, they don't really get really sick. They don't get tons of disease. The years that I have been growing it here, it has been a great producer, and yes, the plants get huge. Most of these are indeterminate varieties, and the plants do get huge, but they're also huge tomatoes. Cherokee Purple is a must. If you're growing tomatoes and if you love heirloom varieties, you know that Cherokee Purple is absolutely one of the best. It doesn't get really huge compared to Dr. Witches or pineapple. It doesn't really get that huge, but the flavor is intense, and I absolutely love this tomato. I have been growing this tomato from the beginning, and I will keep on growing it year after year. Another meaty tomato is Wood's famous Brimmer. It is an absolutely delight. This tomato is one of my early producers for some reason. The tomato is only about 3 to 4 inches. It doesn't really get that huge, but it is really, really a tasty tomato. Abe Lincoln it's not new. I grew it last year for the first time, but last year was a tricky year for tomatoes for me, and I am going to give it a chance because it really did very well for having that crappy weather last year for tomatoes. It did very, very well, and I'm going to give Abe Lincoln another chance this year. Last year I got really nice harvest from one of the plants that I had, and even though I planted it late in the season, and I wonder if that's why it did so well, because it kind of bypassed all of that crazy weather that we had early in the spring. On the description it says that it's amazing for slicing or canning, and I'm hoping that this year it really does amazing, and it does even better than it did last year. German Pink is another one of my favorites. I definitely grew these for the last couple of years, and I just love it. There is something about big slicer meaty tomatoes that I just love, especially if they are resistant to disease in my zone. As the name implies, German Pink, the fruit is a little bit on the pink side, which it tricked me the first year that I grew it because I was waiting for the fruit to get completely red, and then when I checked on the name it said German Pink, and anyway, Prairie Fire. Prairie Fire is definitely one that I'm going to repeat this year. Last year, it was the first year growing these guys, and it really did surprise me. It went out early when all of my other tomatoes did, and even though my other tomatoes did really crappy because of the weather, this tomato did amazing. One of the things that I did not take into consideration was that this is not an indeterminate tomato. It only grew about 2 feet tall, but it kept producing all summer long. And it was an early producer for me. And the flavor of these pear-shaped tomatoes is just amazing. So this year, I know how it grows, and I'm definitely going to place it somewhere where it can produce and get better sunshine, because where I had it, it was definitely getting lots of shade because I was expecting it to grow 4 or 5 feet tall. But Prairie Fire, it's one that you should definitely try. Paul Robinson is another one just like Cherokee Purple that it's definitely a must in my garden. I have been growing this guy since the first year, and I have been also saving the seeds from the years after. So I have plenty of Paul Robinson seeds in here for the next few years, and I love it because just like Cherokee Purple, it is very reliable in my zone. I can just have a couple of these plants and they do amazing. The tomatoes don't get really huge. They're only about 7 to 10 ounces, but the flavor is very different than any other tomato. It has just like the description says, it has a smoky flavor to it. If you want to try a different kind of tomato for your garden this year, Paul Robinson, it will be definitely one to try. Big Rainbow they're all my favorites. I keep saying they're my favorites, but if they are here, it's because they really are my favorites. I love this tomato because it gets huge and it produces lots of fruit. And you're going to find me saying this tomato produces a lot. This tomato is the best. I love this flavor. But they are really great tomatoes, great varieties to have in my garden, in my zone. If you have not grown Big Rainbow, one to try as well. And here are a couple of cherry tomatoes that I am trying this year. Sunrise Bumblebee tomato was one of my favorite cherry tomatoes that I grew last year. Again, last year was a crappy year for tomatoes, but this guy really did surprise me, and I love the sweet flavor that they gave me. If you do not like sweet cherry tomatoes, you're not gonna like this guy, but if you do, this is one that you definitely gotta try. Isis Candy Cherry is definitely another one because of the flavor, because of their sweet flavor. This is another one that I highly recommend, and this is another one of my cherries that I'm going to grow this year as well. And the two other cherries that I'm growing, which I don't have the packets because they're inside somewhere, is my favorite of all cherries, Sun Sugar cherries. And I grew a bunch of them last year in my arbor, on the back side of my arbor, and they did amazing. If you are looking for an intense, big producer, very resistant to disease, Sun Sugar tomatoes are definitely one that you guys gotta try. And another one that I'm growing right next to it for the first time this year it will be sun gold tomatoes. Apparently they're supposed to be also one of the sweetest tomatoes out there. I don't know how they're going to compare to my sun sugars, honestly, because after having my sun sugars in my garden, I don't think that there really isn't any other cherry that can compare to it, but I will let you know. And these next 5 are the new ones that I'm going to grow this year. I got all of these from Baker Creek's. Bread and salt. I don't know about you, but I am easily influenced by pictures. And if I get any tomatoes that look like this, I'm going to be very happy. On the description, it says that they are very exquisite for slicing, sauce making, and everything in between. And they are indeterminate, so it means that I just have to give them enough space, a huge trellis, just like I do for the rest of my tomatoes. And I'm very excited about this one. The next one that is new for me is Missouri Pink Love Apple Tomato. That's a mouthful. We'll see how it does as far as flavor goes, but it's supposed to be a big 1-pounder tomatoes. We'll see how they do. I'm very excited. I have huge hopes. I have high expectations for all of my tomatoes, but again, I will let you know how these guys do. Pink Tiger, they're only about 2 inches. The fruit is not really that big, but I'm excited to try them and see how they do. While I do love slicers, while I do love huge beefy tomatoes, I also enjoy the small varieties that I can just cut for a snack. It is really hard, especially if I'm eating something from the garden, it is really hard to eat a 1-pound tomato by itself versus having just a couple of these guys. So we'll see how they do. This one intrigues me. This one is Indigo Blue Chocolate Tomato. Again, I don't know. It's supposed to be a sweet and juicy black tomato, and the fruit is only about 1 to 2 ounces, so they don't really get that big. And again, I will let you know how these do. But the one that I'm the most intrigued by is this watermelon beef steak. I mean, look at the picture. Isn't that amazing? I don't know how it's supposed to do. The fruit is supposed to be kind of on the big side, 1 to 2 pounds, but I will let you know. So that's it, you guys. These are all the tomato varieties that I am growing for this year. I have quite a few. Thank you for being here, and until the next time.